Then it came about, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the sons of Israel again committed infidelity with the Baals and made Baal-berith their god. So the sons of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had saved them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. Nor did they show kindness to the household of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in accordance with all the good that he has done for Israel.
Wow.
Welcome back to the Black Bible.
The Black Bible.
The Black Bible.
The Black Bible.
Message and rhythm.
Moments in the Bible that make us go, what?
God can take an unfavorable situation and turn it.
They don't have that type of insight to say, and I'm going to say maturity.
Like I said, I will try my best to stall, but it's going to be like, people who know me, it's going to be written all over my face. Yeah.
Church is made of imperfect people trying to serve a perfect God. Hey guys, welcome back to the Black Bible. And today we are going to talk about Gideon. And more specifically, we're talking about how the people of Israel treated Gideon and his family after Gideon helped them defeat their enemies. Right?
I like to call it the aftermath of Gideon.
Yeah.
But this is before the conspiracy with his son Abimelech, and that's what I like to call this period.
So before we even talk about Gideon and the aftermath, let's just set a precedence. Let's just set the background, the scene for what's going on here. So Judges is literally about the mercy of God. If I'm wrong.
No, you're right. You're right.
Because when you read Judges, it's really the pattern that goes along. It says the people sin against God. Life gets tough. They cry. God says, all right, let me help you out. They send a judge. Life gets better. And then they go and sin again. Mm-hmm. And the cycle repeats itself. And I think the best chapter and verses that summarizes what happened in Judges is chapter 2, verses 13 through 15. And it says, they abandoned the Lord to serve Baal and the images of Ashereth. This made the Lord burn with anger against Israel. So he handed them over to raiders who stole their possessions. He turned them over to their enemies all around, and they were no longer able to resist them. Every time Israel went out to battle, the Lord fought against them, causing them to be defeated, just as he had warned, and the people were in great distress. I mean, they knew better, and yet still chose not to do better.
Right.
That's the point. I think that's the problem Israel had in Judges. And even when you read further down, the writer of Judges starts to say, and Israel had no king, and everybody did what they wanted to do, and everybody did what was right in their own sight. So Israel is having a problem with obeying God, and these judges come about to help correct Israel, to help free them from their captors, and help correct them and bring them back towards God.
And so Gideon was one of the judges that was just mentioned. And so, and the thing I like about Gideon is how his willingness that he obeyed God. Like, I know Gideon must have been scared because the Midianite army, if I remember correctly from reading Judges, was a big army.
Yeah.
And God had moved in such a way that God had only gave Gideon only 300 men to fight.
Right.
So I know Gideon must have been scared, but I do remember that one of the things that happened was that God directed Gideon to go into the enemy's camp, and by overhearing a dream that one of the enemy soldiers had, his friend was like, oh, that means that basically we're going to fall into the hands of Gideon. Again, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
So, and I know that was kind of what put, sails in Gideon's wind in Gideon's sails, and kind of pushed him along to be like, you know what, it may only be 300 of us, but we got God on our side, so let's get this done. Let's free our people from Midian. And so you could read it for yourself. I believe is Judges, the whole story of Gideon ranges from Judges 6 to 8. If you want to read afterwards with Gideon's son Abimelech, that's Judges 6 to 9. But the thing about, again, the moment that has me going, like, it's not even really, like, what? But it's more like, this week. Because I know we do moments in the Bible that make us go, what? But nah, there's moments in the Bible that makes me go, this week. Because it's just something that, and again, it did say in Judges 2 that when the judge died, the people of Israel went back to doing what they were already doing. Right. It did say that in Judges 2 if you read further down. And it was not unexpected that when Gideon died, when Gideon, I just said it, when Gideon died, that the people of Israel went back to worshiping false idols, false gods. But what gets me just like, is how they just completely just neglected the fact that, Gideon, like this man, had delivered them from oppression of the Midianites. Of Midian, I think they were called the Midianites. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. And they just completely said, yeah, that's nice, but he's dead. So forget him and forget his 70 kids. Because Gideon was very prosperous in the children's department.
He had 70 kids, which is crazy. But
70 sons.
Yeah.
I'm correct. 70 sons. It doesn't say how much daughters he had, but he had 70 sons.
Right.
So just 70 sons alone, unless God just blessed him with sons back to back to back, there's also some daughters mixed up in that. So, Gideon had a lot of kids. And it's just like, okay, forget Gideon and forget his kids. He's dead. Matter of fact, only reason why we worship God was because the God that rescued us was the same God that Gideon was serving. And now that Gideon is dead, and again, this is not stated in the Bible, but I could just imagine the mindset of the children of Israel. Now that Gideon is dead, we don't necessarily have to worship that same God, and forget his children too. And I'm just like, because it just doesn't, I guess it's just one thing that doesn't sit right with me. Like, yes, the children of Israel were in a cycle of sin. Yeah. Like, they were in a cycle of sin, and it took a godly judge to break that cycle, but not even permanently. Because even if you read in the Bible, whenever there wasn't a godly judge, I believe this was after Israel, this was after the split between, Israel had split into Judah and Israel.
Yeah. So even after there wasn't a king, so when you get into kings, Israel had split. There was basically I call it North Israel and South Israel. So it's Israel and Judah. So
Judah, right. So whenever there wasn't a godly king in Israel, because Judah had a lot more godly kings than Israel. I can't even remember if there was a godly king in Israel at that time. But whenever there wasn't a godly king, the people fell back into idol worship. Yeah. But I guess what doesn't sit right for me is just that this person who God had used, who had delivered you guys, who had freed you guys from oppression, and by that freedom brought on 40 years of peace. Yeah. You just completely just tossed them aside. Like, and not only tossed them aside, but they didn't even go and take care of his family. No. They just left his family to the dogs.
I think the part of the story that really gets me, like, this week is that his own son tried to kill off his half-brothers. Yeah. And he did it for power, And I think maybe if the people of Shechem, I think that's where Gideon was from, where he landed up in. If they had taken care of Gideon and his family, maybe this son wouldn't feel like, I need to rule over these people. Right. Because then the son just gets this idea, like, I want to be king, and, decides, I'm going to kill off all 70 of my half-brothers, or 69, and only one of them survives to tell the tale that, God is not going to be pleased, and all y'all going to be struck down, and a man that you thought is going to be your king, he's going to end up hurting and killing most of y'all. Right. And so I think that's the part that gets me like, like, will you really would do that to your own 70 brothers? And even though he was born of a concubine, like, these are still your half-brothers. Your father was still Gideon. I mean, he should have been, like you said, they should have been taken care of, because he basically, with the help of God, helped these people get rid of the Midianites.
And so I think, again, I think the story of Gideon is kind of sort of a reflection of what, what goes on, what happens today.
Yeah.
And I like to think that, on top of God putting the story of Gideon, or allowing the writer of Judges and the person who collected the books of the Bible and put it all into what we know today, that the reason why Gideon was included was not only to, show how deep the cycle ran for Israel,
right,
but also to kind of show, like, what, there's going to be times where God's going to use you
mm-hmm.
to help somebody
mm-hmm.
or help a group of people. And when your work is done, like, that's it. If that makes any sense.
That makes sense.
Whereas just that those people, I won't say that that person will not be ungrateful for your help,
mm-hmm.
nor would I say those people will be ungrateful for your help. But if we go according to what happened to Gideon, mm-hmm. and it wasn't until after Gideon had died that they basically said, bump Gideon and bump his children.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that's kind of like today, but yeah, I'm trying to pull my thoughts together as I talk.
It's okay.
But for me, like, reading that, it kind of shows me that today, like, you don't even have to die for people to be like, you know what, bump you and bump your children. Like, I know you helped me, but I no longer need your help,
mm-hmm.
if that makes any sense. So it kind of seems like the story of Gideon for me is kind of sort of like a reflection of what can happen today when God uses you to help somebody.
And it's kind of true, like, I think what people need to understand is that when God chooses you to help somebody, they might not be, I'm not going to say happy, but thankful that you helped them. And it's okay if they're not thankful. I think as long as you do what you're supposed to do, then as long as you do what God has told you to do, then you're in the clear. Because I think God knew that Israel was going to go back into the same old pattern.
Right. He
knew that. And God knew that Gideon and his family would be forgotten about after Gideon had died. But that wasn't the point, The point was God had chose Gideon to free his people from the Midianites. And Gideon was from Ophrah, right?
Yeah.
Not from Shechem. So God has chose him to free his people and free his town from the Midianites. And they were grateful for a time. But after he died, they went back to the same old. So it's if you are led to help somebody, they might be grateful in your face as long as you're there with them. But you might turn around and they might be ungrateful, or they might go back to the same old. That doesn't mean that what you did was null and void.
Right.
It just means that God had used you for a moment in the season, and it could have just been you being used to help them was strengthening you.
Right.
So
another thing that, and I know you kind of want to talk about the aftermath of Gideon, but another thing that I think is kind of sort of important to backtrack before mm-hmm. Gideon's death is another point that I want to bring up, is that sometimes God will use you and people won't be happy.
Yeah.
And
true.
The reason why I bring this up is because when he went up against Midian, and basically the commanders, either was the commanders or kings of Midian, again, mm-hmm. correct me if I'm wrong, was running away, then like the people of Ephraim came up and said, why didn't you call us for battle?
Right.
Like they said, like, why didn't you come and get us? And the people of Ephraim were very heated. And like, of course, Gideon had talked them down and managed to avoid an altercation with his own people.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of, again, shows me that sometimes God will use you to do something, and it works out, and maybe for the whole betterment for your community even, or maybe even the area that your community or your state or even your church home.
Right.
And some people, they won't be happy. They'll kind of be like, okay, yes, I know God called you to do this, but why aren't you also calling me to help?
I have a question, and what do you do? And I think that I know the answer, but what do you do when people aren't happy that God has called you to do something? What do you do?
Me personally, because I have the mentality of live peaceably with all men.
Right.
Like, I have the mentality of if you don't have to fight with anybody, mm-hmm. then you just avoid fighting where you can, because I don't know about you, but the older I get, the more I realize that it costs too much energy to be angry.
True.
And it costs too much energy to be fighting with people and holding grudges against people. It's
True.
just too much energy.
True.
So, but in that case, it's kind of just like, you just have to talk to them. Like, they may get up in your face, they may be spitting words behind your back, they may be slandering your name, dragging your name through the mud. But before you even talk to them, you pray. Right. And you say, God, you don't even have to explain the situation. Say, God, you see what's going on. And, direct me and lead me not to stoop to this person's level, if that makes any sense. It does. Help me not to resort to what they're doing. And then B, if it's still going on, and if you think that you are strong enough, because I know me personally that I couldn't do it. I can't go talk to somebody who's dragging my name through the mud, because if they start getting in my face, I'll lose my Jesus. I'll lose my Jesus real quick. But also, I believe that you should talk to them. You should say, like, you know what? I know what you're doing, and can you please stop? And if they still decide to continue dragging your name through the mud, all because of something that God has called you to do, then at that point, you tune them out, you put on your blinders, and you keep pushing forward. Because at the end of the day, if this is what God has called you to do, and you know for a fact this is what he called you to do, then let the people talk. Because at the end of the day, they're going to eat their own words anyway, whether they stop talking about you when you ask them to, or when they realize that this person was really called by God, and by speaking against you, they're speaking against God. So,
another question, because I totally agree. Another question I think before we go on with this, do you think that people do that because they are A, intimidated, and or B, jealous that God is using you and not them?
Yeah. I think most definitely, and I just want to preface this with, I don't have much experience in that if God has called me for some things, I don't hear what people are saying behind my back, because I won't say I don't put myself in that situation, but the way I live my life is kind of just like, okay, I'm in my own circle, my own bubble, and I have the people who are close to me, and then there's everybody else. So really and truly, like, I would have to be walking by someone, and of course my circle will tell me, this person said this about you, and to which I will reply with, that's their problem, not mine. Wow. But I do believe that sometimes it's done out of, like you said, sometimes it's done because they're intimidated of you. Sometimes they're jealous, and they're jealous of you. And again, from my personal belief, is that most of the times that they are jealous, and that they see God using you for this thing, and they see God working through you, and they see people getting helped, people getting saved, or they may see, someone who was deemed that they wrote off, that all of a sudden they come back to church and they're even a more powerful force in the ministry, all because of what God had done through you. And they're like, okay, God, why couldn't you have chosen me to do it? Because I think the one reason why is because they want the praise and accolades from their peers. I think that's why. Because yes, like, but as humans, like, it feels good when someone pats us on the back and say, yeah, you did good. Yeah. Like, it's nothing wrong on getting praise for something you've accomplished. But but in the kingdom of God, that shouldn't be the reason why you do things. Right. Like, you shouldn't do things for awards. You shouldn't do things for the pastor to shout you out from the podium. You should do it because God called you to do it and you want to do it. Right. Like, praise and accolades and rewards, whether it be monetary, whether it be a materialistic reward like a plaque, like rewards and stuff like that should come secondary. Or matter of fact, that shouldn't even be in your mind. And yes, I know as humans, and even I find myself falling into it sometimes, where it's just like, okay, I've been doing this thing, can I get some compensation? Can I get a pat on the back? But then I have to catch myself, right, and say that, you know what, I'm not doing this for money, I'm not doing this for awards, I'm not doing this for praise, I'm doing this so God will get the glory. And whatever trickles down from God getting the glory, should God decide to bless me, then he'll bless me. If he doesn't bless me, then I'm still going to do what I've been called to do, because that's what I've been called to do, and I enjoy doing what I've been called to do. So I think at the end of the day, it's a thing of glory. They want their moment in the spotlight. They want their moment in the sun. And so they're like, wow, God, you couldn't use me for that. You had to use them. Like them who, in their mind, them who are less qualified than me, them who hasn't been in the church as long as me, them who I'm a deacon, I'm an evangelist, I'm a minister, and they're just a churchgoer. Like you had to use them instead of me. But the reason why God didn't use you is because He knew that you weren't going to do it for the right reason. You were going to do it because you wanted the glory the glory that would have came from you doing that. And all glory doesn't belong to man; it belongs to God. That's why God didn't use you, or that's why God didn't use that person.
That is so true. There's a lot of people that feel like, well, God should have used me. They shouldn't have used them, but God knows why they didn't use you. And the part that you said, like, I'm more qualified, that hit me so hard. Because when you talked about Gideon felt so underqualified for this job. And I'm pretty sure there were other people who were more qualified, but God chose Gideon because He knew that the glory that would have come from this would be to God and not to Gideon. Like Gideon might be, honored and revered, but all glory would have went back to God. And that hit me so hard with the qualifications, because there's so many people who are out there not doing what God has said they're supposed to do because they feel underqualified. Yeah. And there are people who told them that you're not qualified to do that. You should, you shouldn't be telling people you shouldn't be sharing the good news. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing that. You have no type of qualifications. And it's so crazy to me because the disciples were the most underqualified people to begin with. Peter was a fisherman. What fisherman? One of them, Matthew, was a tax person, wasn't he?
I believe so.
And ain't nobody like the tax people. We don't even like the tax people today. And then Judas Iscariot, we don't talk about him much, but Judas loved money. Yeah. They were the most underqualified bunch, but they had Jesus, which is the most important part of this whole entire thing. Gideon was super underqualified, but God was on his side. And so that part about being underqualified and people saying that, I'm more qualified than this other person, hit me so hard, because qualifications is not what's important. Because I think somebody says God doesn't call the qualified, but He qualifies the called, And so you might feel like, I can't do this because I don't have this type of credentials, or I haven't been in church this long. But if you really are pursuing God and God has called you to do something, man, do it, yo. That's just the bottom line.
Let's do it.
Because and you might have some reservations, like Gideon. Gideon started off with all these people, and he said, God, if you're in it, show me. And God said something else, and Gideon was like, okay, God, if you're in it, do something else. And God did something else, and he said, God, if you're in it, do something else. And God did something else. You might be timid, or you might be apprehensive like Gideon was, and you want to make sure that God is with you every step of the way. But I'd rather a person do that than they be pig-headed, I think the word is, or they have a big head and they're like, I'm going to just do it and make things fall apart because they never consulted God, or they feel like they're bigger than everybody else, and they make people feel small, and that doesn't draw people to Christ. That doesn't.
It pushes them away.
It pushes them away. Yeah, it pushes them away from Christ. So I just think that when we talk about people being jealous, because I think the people of Ephraim were just like, they weren't in it. They didn't want Gideon to call them because they wanted to help.
Right.
They wanted the spoils of war. That's what I think. They wanted the glory. They wanted people to say, the men of Ephraim, they came and helped Gideon. And if it wasn't for the men of Ephraim, this would have went south, So it's just crazy in that sense.
And the one thing that even the devotion that I read this morning is that God loves using the underdog.
Yep.
Like God loves using in my honest opinion, God loves using the people that other people wouldn't have expected God to use.
Yep.
Like, and that's the whole thing, is that no one expected Gideon, which came from a small town, a small family, a small town, because he even says to the people of Ephraim, like, if I could quickly look at it, in Judges 8 verse 2, he says, but Gideon replied after they came to Gideon and said, why didn't you call us? What have I accomplished compared to you? Are even the leftover grapes of Ephraim harvest better than the entire crop of my little clan of Albezer? And so even Gideon knew that, like, his clan was so small that the leftover grapes of Ephraim harvest, like, those grapes alone are greater than anything that his clan could bring together.
Right.
So even looking at the story of Gideon, God used this underqualified person, and God used 300 men, the underdogs, to topple a vast army and bring 40 years of rest for the people of Israel. So God loves using the underdog. He liked using the underdog back then, and he likes using the underdog now. So, like, whether you feel as if you're underqualified, whether you are underqualified, or whether you have people talking in your ear saying that, you know what, you can't do this because X, Y, Z, A, B, C. You can't do this because you haven't been in ministry long enough. You can't do this because you're not an elder. You can't do this because of whatever reason. And you know that within your heart, God has called you to do it. Then, like I said, tune those people out, put on your blinders and just go. Because the one thing I know is that if God is with you, then, and you've been called to do this and God is with you, then you cannot fail if you trust in God, and just go.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole point about this, is that Gideon didn't go in his own strength. Right. Gideon went with instructions from God. And so, again, I feel like, I don't know why this whole thing about being qualified just really stuck with me, but, like, it sticks with me so much because I understand how it feels to be underqualified. Like, you feel like, I'm not good enough for this.
Right.
I understand how it feels to feel like, there's somebody out there who could do this much better than I can. And so, in order for me I had to get over that, I'm not good enough, I'm not qualified, I can't do this, and just let God be God, and just tune out all those. And it's not just like the people on the outside, it's also your own self, telling your own self that you can't do that. There's somebody out there who's better than that. You look at you, like, you're super underqualified. You don't even know what you're doing. And it's something that plagues a lot of people, not even just in Christendom, but just in life. I think it's called the imposter syndrome, where you have the skills, but you're like, man, no, I can't do that. I can't, there's no way I could do it, like X, Y, and Z. And you're not an imposter. Like, you're not underqualified. You have everything. If you have Jesus, then you have everything that you need to get this job done. If God has called you to do it, if you have God, you have everything that you need. You might say, like, I don't have the money, but if you have God, the money will come.
Right.
Like, I don't have the manpower. If you have God, the manpower will come. Like, all you have to do is start to do what God has told you to do, and then you'll see other things fall in place. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, but it's God being the center of this, the center of what you're doing, everything else will fall into place. And so, I know we didn't get to the aftermath, which the aftermath is not pretty, because, again, you talk about Abimelech and his own son killing off his half brothers, and then God judging them. But it's a story that everybody should read. Judges 6 through 9. I
believe 6 through 8, and then 6
through 9. Like, I would read 6 through 9, because the aftermath just goes to show that, if God is not in it, then it's not going to work out properly. Right. With Gideon, God was in it, so it worked out in his favor. But when you read about his son Abimelech, God was not in what he did, and God was not pleased, and so he killed people, and the people killed him. So it's something that we all gotta recognize, But the story of Gideon lets you know that if you are an underdog, then God, and you're doing what God has called you to do, God has you. And don't be afraid of doing what God has called you to do. You're not underqualified. You're the right person for the job. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. So thank you again for tuning in to our session of moments in the Bible that make us go, what? Well, this week it was moments in the Bible that make us go, And we'll see you next week.